All right, let's get to beyond who is that? Let's get to one of the most famous people featured in a blend game on the history of ReelBlend's. True Hollywood royalty, Jack Nicholson. And we are playing hashtag Jack Nicholson Blend. Kevin, I'm going to throw it to you first. Tell us your favorite Jack Nicholson film.
I mean, this is such a hard one, but my favorite Nicholson film, I mean, clearly if you're going best, I would go Shining. My favorite Nicholson movie is As Good as It Gets. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's a film about OCD. And there's an OCD element to it. I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 14. A lot of the way OCD is portrayed in cinema and media is a little bit kind of like a watered down version of it, the germs element of it and things like that. I mean, I've been dealing with OCD all my life, so I've gone through the germs phases and all those different things. I don't necessarily think As Good as It Gets is the greatest portrayal of OCD ever, but it was comforting to watch a major film that dealt with a character who's dealing with. I mean, I remember, what was the show, Monk? His character dealt with OCD. And I know OCD has been in cinema. There was just something comforting about seeing it in a comedy. But also, I just remember I love Greg Kinnear. I love the dog in that film. The dog in that film was always the reference of a dog that because our last dog, Oscar, was a Brussels Griffin Shih Tzu mix. Oh, yeah. And anytime someone would ask me what kind of dog Oscar was, I would say, do you remember the dog from As Good as It Gets? That was always my reference point. So I think As Good as It Gets, I choose it because of what it means to me overall. I also think Nicholson is absolutely fantastic in it. It's a comedy.
Won an Oscar.
Yeah, and I think
his third.
Right, and so it's interesting to me because generally speaking, comedy doesn't get the love and respect it deserves. When you throw someone like Nicholson into a comedy, and he's dealing with he's flowing through drama and comedy masterfully. And then the whole Greg Kinnear angle, Helen Hunt. I mean, it is just a wonderful film. And I think that Nicholson, as much as I love him in The Shining and obviously a lot of the work he's done in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where he's brilliant, those are films that I have a hard time returning to over and over. For me, there's a comfort in watching Nicholson in a film like As Good as It Gets. That's also the Nicholson I know and remember always. I mean, like the Nicholson from The Shining and Cuckoo's Nest and all those movies, it's a different Nicholson than I grew up with. I kind of grew up with that 90s Nicholson look. So to me, that's like his immortalized role and look for me will always be Nicholson. I mean, it's so funny because like I'm contemplating in my mind why I didn't go with The Departed, but I just find it. I think it's not. Departed's brilliant and he's great in it.
Not bad, Sean.
But I think it's a great movie. I don't know what you're talking about. But As Good as It Gets is going to be my pick. Solely because it just means a lot to me. I don't think it is a great I don't think it's like a accurate, brilliant representation of OCD, but it plays with the ideas of it in a major motion picture. A major actor is dealing with it, and I found it interesting how he handled it, comedically, dramatically. I think Greg Kinnear, did Kinnear get an Oscar nomination for that film? He is so Helen good in that movie.
Yeah, Helen Hunt won.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So Helen Hunt won for that, and so did Nicholson. Did they get a picture nomination?
Yeah, but they lost to Titanic.
Wasn't that the last year, one of the last years that got picture, director, and the three big acting categories?
It didn't. Oh, you mean to be nominated?
Nominated.
I thought American Hustle would have.
Oh, did it? Okay. I thought it set some kind of a record in terms of like the number of.
It may have, but American Hustle, and also that was the Titanic year, so I think it was just those two Oscars, and I think that was it.
Gotcha.
Can I mention just not an honorable mention because it wouldn't even have like cracked my top 5, but I just wanted to bring up Anger Management because I kind of like that film, and
I've only seen it one time when it came out. I don't think I've seen it since.
I just like Nicholson's dynamic with Sandler. I don't think it's like a great film by any means. I just find it comforting and fun. I don't know why I like Nicholson in comedies, but I think he does a good job. What was it, The Bucket List with Morgan Freeman they did together?
I like The Bucket List.
Me too. And I think, so yeah, As Good as It Gets is probably the one I would pop into my mind first. And to be honest with you, I'll be fully honest, I did not have my pick until I just said it.
There you go. Jake, what'd you go with?
Yeah,
I'm going with The Shining. Just his performance.
Yeah.
One, it's my favorite horror movie. But his devolving into a monster, his personification of alcoholism, as we've learned, represented with Stephen King. I mean, can you remember a monster who is so charming? Like he is a guy who is genuinely to a point where he is possessed and trying to chop up his family with an axe. And I am just sitting there and I cannot take my eyes off of him. I mean, his performance, like it's, and you know, Kevin, you use this sort of train of thought a lot, but it's such also a heartbreaking performance that every time I watch it, I think that part of me is like, come on, like snap out of it, man. Like where you hope, like, I'm not, but there's a part of you that hopes that he can, because, especially too, Dr. Sleep also gave me such a greater appreciation for The Shining and for Nicholson's performance. There's that moment where it flash forwards in time, and I think Danny's getting like his 8-year chip at AA, and he says something about how like my dad wanted nothing more than to be here at this moment. Mm-hmm. My dad wanted nothing more than to be here for his family, and that makes Nicholson's performance even more heartbreaking because he wanted so badly to get away from alcoholism. He wanted so badly to get a fresh start that he was that's what that hotel was supposed to represent. It was supposed to represent a chance to bring his family out there, get started on his new novel, get away from the booze, and the fact that what ended up happened is all the more heartbreaking. And I just thought that he perfectly represents it. He is a man who can represent someone who's broken and down on his luck, but also someone who you're cheering for to get better. And then obviously the man knows how to represent a monster. It was a easy pick for me.
And to me, there's nothing more powerful than what Jake was saying about a film where you hope something happens differently. Mm-hmm. Like every time I watch Terminator 2, I genuinely hope that he won't sink himself into the molten steel.
It's not how movies work.
But it's so funny. It's like Titanic is the same.
Unless they're George Lucas movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Greedo shot first. Han shot first. Who cares? No, but I find it interesting what films do that for us. Not every movie does that. There's only certain ones, and I think
Back to the Future with the lightning strike.
That's a great one.
There's like Titanic is one that happens for me on. Like I say to myself, just get on the board, or like maybe this time you will, or like
is it usually movies that we kind of watched growing up, where like because I feel like as a child you're much more open to the idea of maybe things will work out differently in a movie. Like I don't really find myself doing it as much as an adult, unless it's a movie that I watched as a kid.
And that's kind of speaks to the brilliance of what Quentin Tarantino did with like Hollywood, for example, where like you do get the magic.
Like what if?
And it's like it's very that to me is very interesting thematically as a filmmaker. If you dive down that path where like you are getting a change.
Damn it! Now I gotta watch Hollywood again.
Dude, I put it on the other day for I think the 21st time. Just like it's a background film now for me.
I put it on a lot during the summer. It's a great summer, like there are summer drinks. Yeah. I feel like that's a great summer background movie. Just like when the sun's up and it's warm outside, pop it on, have it in the background.
That'd be a cool blend game, by the way. I don't know what we would call it, but like second chance blend or whatever it would be, like where a movie ending that you always hope will change when you watch it. I don't know if that's too confusing to dive into, but could be something interesting.
Yeah. There's an idea there.
So people might assume that my choice for Jack Nicholson blend would be A Few Good Men, a movie that I raved about often, but I don't feel that is a Nicholson film. I feel that that's a Tom Cruise film. So I went with the other Jack Nicholson film, which I could honestly watch daily, which is Chinatown.
I love when we have 3 different picks.
Especially with Nicholson, his filmography is so deep.
Insane.
Obviously, I've talked about my love for...
His name's Jake.
Detective films, very specifically those 40s, 50s, 60s era gumshoe type films. But as I was falling in love with that genre and picking up a bunch of different examples of them, I tapped into what he did as Jake Gittes in Chinatown, and it just became the seminal example of... He is he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. More often than times he's not. He figures out that he's working his way through the case, but comes up with a bunch of clues by accident a lot of times.
Yeah.
There are huge reveals and gut punches coming in Chinatown that I will not give you away here. And he is just as gut punched by them as they arrive.
Physically.
Oh my God, yes. And he's just phenomenal. I mean, he exudes charisma. Young Nicholson is like staring at a bright, shining star that you can't tear your eyes away from. Obviously, working with Roman Polanski, who was firing on all cylinders at that point as well too. It's probably the best screenplay that's ever been made. It's studied up and down. Robert Towne's screenplay is studied in classes for the way
that's
that
a
it's
good
able
blend
to.
game.
Screenplay?
Blend.
That's another really good one. And
It's a great screenplay.
I'm in love with California and that era of California.
Yeah.
It's everything about Chinatown is fantastic, and specifically Nicholson, and specifically the way that he plays it. So
And they make water interesting.
Yeah. I was thinking of water when I think of Chinatown.
Yeah. Chinatown is so brilliant. And I was interviewing someone the other day, the actor Jack Nicholson, whose grandfather is John Huston.
It's John Huston.
And John Huston's in that scene with the knife, right?
Yes.
So Polanski.
John Huston is the grandfather in that one. I think so. I don't think it's John Huston who cuts him.
Well, no. Polanski is the one who cuts him.
Right.
I know that. Polanski plays the guy who cuts him, correct? If I'm not mistaken, I believe Polanski that's his cameo. But I think Huston's in that scene too. I think, but maybe I could be wrong.
I'd have to go back and see. So John Huston is the older guy who he goes to on the orange groves, who he interviews. But I forget if he's in that scene with the nose cut.
Almost certain. Someone double check this. I think Polanski's the one who actually cuts his nose.
Yeah,
and I'm almost certain on that. And it's so funny because I rewatched. My father-in-law is so awesome, and his birthday's coming up. So happy birthday, by the way, Damien. We watched Chinatown a month or so ago at his house, and to this day, I did not know Polanski was the one who cut his nose. I did not know that.
It is Polanski, yes. I'm watching the scene right now.
But Huston's in this somewhere in that, and I just can't remember. I don't know why that came to me, but yeah. Anyways, great movie. Yes. But Huston's in the movie for sure. I just don't remember if that's the scene or not.
He is not in the scene where he cuts the nose. John Huston, he goes and interviews him later at a different time.
Okay, cool.
And I don't want to reveal his importance to the story in case, God forbid, you've made it this far into the show and haven't watched Chinatown. Okay, Marquise Martinez says, as good as it gets. And Kevin, they write, it's the film that showed me Jack Nicholson could play somebody other than a crazy maniac. And him as a vulnerable man with OCD being swept off his feet by a waitress was so enjoyable to watch, and he's amazing in it. Randy Buss went with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And Lydia Mascaro went with somebody who I was guaranteed one of you two would choose, which is Joker. This is Joker from Batman.
But I think my issue is that he's Jack Nicholson.
He is.
It's Jack Nicholson fighting Batman. You know what?
Doesn't that sound awesome?
That does sound awesome. You know what I love him in, and he's only in it for just a couple of minutes. Broadcast news.
Yeah, true.
When he's like the network anchor.
Yeah.
Oh, he's great in that.
Small part though.
It's so funny. I actually don't. When I think of Batman, I don't think of Nicholson really.
No, but it was a
great.
Gigantic part for him.
But what's funny, I would argue that the opposite happened in Dark Knight, where Ledger was the. I mean, aside from,
but keep in mind, Nicholson got top billing over Keaton for Batman, and was one of the Nicholson. Go back and look at the Batman poster. It says Nicholson on the top.
Well, also, Keaton was only like Mr. Mom at that point, right? Like he didn't have huge roles to his name, I don't think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can't believe Nicholson got top billing.